From the Berkshires to the Sound, from wherever you live in MLB America, this is Inside the Parker. You give us 22 minutes and we'll give you the scoop on Major League Baseball. Now, here's Baseball Hall of Fame voter number 57.
You have another hot take.
Will not NOT make the playoffs.
Shohei me the money.
Rob Parker.
Come on! I've been covering Major League Baseball for almost 40 years now. In New York, in Cincinnati, in Detroit, in LA. I love this game. Let's go! Welcome into the podcast, and I'm your host, Rob Parker. And what a show we have for you today. Before we even get started, remember, press this button, the subscribe button, so that you're always here, always up to date with all the best coverage of Major League Baseball. As you know, I've been covering baseball since 1986. I love the sport. This is the place for your baseball fix. Welcome into the podcast. I'm your host, Rob Parker, and what a very special edition of Inside the Parker, all about Pete Rose, yes, and a stunning decision by Major League Baseball to make him eligible and no longer banned. So we'll get into that. Author Keith O'Brien, who's written a really tremendous book about Pete Rose, he'll join us. We'll also go to Cincinnati. They had Pete Rose Day at the Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. And we have a super fan, Mike Williams. He'll tell us all about what went down, plus foul affair, all that and much more. Let's go.
Here comes the big interview. Listen and learn.
Oh, it's so good.
Now let's welcome in author Keith O'Brien, who wrote the book, Charlie Hustle, The Rise and Fall of Pete Rose and the Last Glory Days of Baseball. Keith, we've had you on before. It's so apropos to have you now. And again, welcome to Inside the Parker. How you doing, Keith?
I'm great, man. How are you? Great to be back with you.
Absolutely. Man, so the announcement that Pete Rose, I know Shoeless Joe was also reinstated. He died in 1951, and for whatever reason, they decided to throw him in, I guess, to try to throw off the scent that this was about Pete Rose, whether the commissioner wants to admit it or not. Did you know this was coming, and how surprised are you?
There was so much smoke around this fire in the past 6 weeks. I think most people suspected this was coming. And yet I was still stunned, Rob. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, this decision reversed 36 years of established Major League policy around Pete Rose. He had applied for reinstatement many times through multiple commissioners. Nothing ever changed. And so it was still a stunning announcement. And I agree with what you said there in the intro. I think, in some ways, this was a stroke of genius by Rob Manfred. He didn't make it about Pete Rose. He essentially has made a semantic decision, a rule decision. What's more baseball than a rule decision, right? By saying that when a player dies, his ineligibility dies with him. And thus, 17 different players, including Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe and 15 others, revert back to normal status and the status quo. And in doing so, Rob Manfred has taken an annual question that always comes up. He's taken it off his plate and he's moved it to someone else's. The National Baseball Hall of Fame will now be answering questions about Pete Rose. Major League Baseball won't any longer.
Right. And it just doesn't sit right with me as a Hall of Fame voter and whatnot. And this is probably going to go to the, Veterans Committee or whatever they call it now, not the writers per se, for Pete Rose. And there's a good chance that he could get in. I've heard a lot of pushback from a lot of former players. It doesn't sound like they're gung-ho for Pete Rose to get in. I guess, in baseball doing this, what is the point of having a lifetime ban? And I get it that he's not alive anymore. But what you do is open the door to celebrate a guy who did something against the integrity of the sport that could have damaged it. And that's the reason you have rules in place. Does that make sense? Like I get he's not alive, but now there's a chance that you're going to celebrate a guy who broke the biggest and cardinal rule of the game.
You know, the thing that I guess upsets me the most is that it's not going to the Baseball Writers of America, is that you won't get a chance to cast a vote. I think that would have been a fascinating public discussion that would have unfolded in the marketplace, in the town square, about Pete Rose and about integrity and about who we honor and who we don't. I don't love the idea that this conversation, this robust and complicated conversation, is now going to happen essentially in a back room, the smoky back room, and we won't really know what goes down there. If writers like yourself and so many others had a chance to weigh in, it would have filled the podcast. It would have filled the columns. People could have replied off one another. We could have sorted it out. And I think, honestly, that's what should have happened in the beginning. When Rose was banned in August 1989, there was no rule in place that took ineligible players off the ballot. In fact, Rose thought he would appear on the ballot 2 years later in 1991, and so did Commissioner Bart Giamatti. Giamatti is asked that day at his press conference in New York, what are we to do about Pete Rose when he appears on the ballot? And I loved Giamatti's answer. Giamatti said that he looked forward. He looked forward to seeing how the voters, how the writers weighed life and art and how they judged the two together. And I just wish the writers that you and so many other voters could have that conversation.
And the thing is, and I'm I respect, I don't agree with all the writers in there, but that I respect their votes and they've put in the work and the time of covering the sport, that even if it's not something that I agree with, I respect everybody's right to have a vote and to pick the guy that they want because of the reasons that they choose that are important. Do we know that Pete Rose was a great player, one of the greatest? That's not even a question for anybody, right? Until Mariano Rivera became unanimous, no player had ever been unanimous. If you went on Pete Rose's stats alone, I don't know how you could not vote for him, like in that vein. But we know that you can't separate the man, Keith, and that is the part when you look at his entire career and what he's done. And my question to you here is this. Had Pete Rose come clean immediately, begged for forgiveness, said, I'm going to go to Gamblers Anonymous, I'm going to speak to kids about the dangers of gambling and whatnot, and really been contrite and said, hey, I made a colossal mistake. I never wanted to hurt baseball. I have a problem and I need to get help. Do you doubt he would have been in the hall, would have been suspended, came back, and been able to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame?
Not only would he not have been elected into the Hall of Fame way back in the 90s if he had done that, I believe that Rose might have even been back in a dugout. He might have even been back on the field. When this unfolds in 1989, we got to rewind the tape a little bit. Rose is not a scandalous figure. He is not a villain. He is a great American icon. He is fundamental to the game of baseball. He's still in 1989 as a manager, one of its biggest stars. And so this was bad for baseball. And when baseball first learns about it, they call him to New York for a secret meeting. And in that meeting is outgoing Commissioner Peter Ueberroth, incoming Commissioner and then President of the National League, Bart Giamatti, and Bart Giamatti's right-hand man, Fay Vincent. And they ask him point blank that day that they've heard a rumor that Sports Illustrated is investigating a story that he's betting on the Reds, he's betting on baseball. They want to know, is it true? And if Rose was honest, the whole story is different. I believe that baseball would have done everything it could to salvage Pete Rose. And to your point, even after he goes down and is banned, He doesn't do any of those things that you just said. He doesn't go on tour. He doesn't go on campuses and speak about the dangers of gambling. He won't acknowledge for 15 years that Bart Giamatti and John Dowd, the investigator for Major League Baseball, are even right. His lies hurt lots of people. His lies hurt Bart Giamatti and his memory. He never does that sort of speaking tour in which he could have helped lots of people, not just himself. And it is, in some ways, classic Pete Rose. He sort of missed this opportunity to get right with the world. And he missed it many, many times in the last 36 years of his life.
Keith O'Brien is our guest. He's written a tremendous book about Pete Rose, and you just touched on the key. I try to tell, callers to my radio show and baseball fans who stop me and ask me about Pete Rose and the whole thing. And they try to blame baseball, and I say it, what you just said is so true. Baseball did not want to have to ban its all-time hit leader. It doesn't help the game at all. It's not what they wanted to do, but Pete couldn't be honest with them. And this, set up camp in Las Vegas, and he kept with it. There's a famous interview when his son has his first at bat, and I'm sure you've seen, Keith, just about everything about Pete Rose, but he's interviewed in the stands. And they ask him about his son making his major league debut and whatnot. And Pete can't even help himself. He says to the reporter, I bet he gets a hit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I thought to myself, you couldn't have said anything more and be Pete Rose, but you get my point. This is not what baseball wanted to do, but it had no choice.
Yeah, as a native of Cincinnati, there was a prominent narrative in 1989 and for years afterwards that Bart Giamatti was, quote, out to get Pete Rose. And it just simply couldn't be further from the truth. Bart Giamatti did what he had to do and what Pete forced him to do by his unwillingness to acknowledge what he had done. And I want to be clear here. Pete makes these mistakes in the 80s because he's addicted to gambling. He is making irrational choices in the way that addicts do. We all might not know in our lives a gambling addict. I would suspect few of us do. But a lot of us know someone in our lives who struggles with addiction to alcohol or drugs. And what do addicts do? They make choices that hurt themselves and others, and they do it again and again. And that's what Pete did in that window of time. And so if he had said, I have a problem, I need help, please help me, Bart Giamatti absolutely would have done that. He just didn't have that choice.
Here's the other thing, too, that I hear a lot, and I push back on. Well, he never bet against the Reds. And I'm saying you're a gambling addict. So the starting pitcher, your guy is bad, he's not pitching well. Do you like the idea, just the notion that he would, because he has this urge to gamble and wants to win, that he would of course, have honor in those situations, even though he knows inside information that maybe his starter or whatever's going on is not that good or his best player is not playing. And they have all the records to back it up. That, of course, he did bet, but there are people who will not let go of this idea that, but he never bet against the Reds. So I don't understand. If you're betting for them to win, what's the difference? Can you just speak to that?
Yeah, there are two issues with that. The first was flagged by Bart Giamatti in 1989. He said that the moment that a player, any player, places a wager even on himself to win, he now has incentives outside the game, and there's just no place for it. That's number one. Number two, what Pete Rose said in the last 20 years of his life wasn't exactly true. Yes, he never bet against the Reds. There is no evidence that he ever placed a wager against his own team. However, based on the printed records, and there are two batches of printed gambling records related to Pete Rose, one from 1986, his last year as a player manager, and one from 1987. And in those batches of gambling records, Rose doesn't always bet on the Reds. And what I mean by that is he bet on them on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And then he didn't on Friday and Saturday, and then he did again on Sunday. And the reason why that's problematic is this. At the time when Pete was betting, he was betting with illegal bookies. And illegal bookies never worked alone. If I'm a bookie and you're a bookie, in the minutes before game time, we are calling each other and we are laying off our bets so that you and I get even. So if you're in New York and everyone in your betting circle is betting on the Mets, and I'm in Cincinnati and everyone in my circle is betting against the Mets, we get even, we lay off our bets. So you and I are going to come out ahead no matter what happens tonight. And so I can assure you that in the minutes before games where Rose did not wager on his own team, bookies were talking, they knew, and money was moving on that.
No doubt. It is very, very interesting how this thing all came about, and and even Pete Rose said, "I'll be in the Hall of Fame when I die" or whatever. And now here we are. He's passed on, and now he's not ineligible anymore, and this is going to go to this committee, and then we'll see where that is with former players. Even though my biggest issue with the Veterans Committee per se is some of the biggest question marks in the Hall of Fame, where people go, well, what about Phil Rizzuto? What about Bill Mazeroski? What about, Pee Wee Reese? Well, they're in the Hall of Fame. Whenever fans do that, I always say they were not voted in by the writers. Like, those are the ones. And that's why I think there's a chance that he could get in. And I tell fans also, people who haven't been up the Hall of Fame, that his stuff is there. He's not whitewashed out where they don't have any of his memorabilia, or you don't know who Pete Rose is. So the idea that he's not in the Hall of Fame is not true.
Well, and listen, there'll be a trickle-down effect no matter what happens here. If the Veterans Committee in 2 years or 5 years, rules that Rose should be enshrined, that's going to open the door to a lot of other of baseball's ne'er-do-wells. Players from the steroid era.
Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Mark McGwire. I mean, I don't know how you'll be able to keep them out.
There are a lot of invested parties now in the Pete Rose case. Similarly, if they rule against him, it would seem to keep the door closed to those folks. I mean, the most fascinating thing is this, and you know this, Rob. For the last 36 years, the Pete Rose debate has been a hypothetical one. And it's been one of those great late night sports debates that we've all had at some point, right? Now it's real. We are having that debate right now. And it is going to be fascinating to see what we as a culture decide to do.
And last thing, it's out there. President Trump was going to pardon Pete Rose. And did this spur the commissioner to jump forward or jump ahead so that it wasn't Trump, it was at least him or baseball making the move rather than the president? What have you heard on that?
I'm speculating a bit here, Rob, but we all know right now that President Trump is putting pressure on lots of people and lots of parties. Corporations as well. Nobody wants to be in the crosshairs of Donald Trump's ire in this particular moment of time. And I think that extends to Major League Baseball as well. If someone was going to move the ball forward here on Pete Rose, I believe Major League Baseball wanted to be the one to do it. It has now happened. Rob Manfred again has taken this thorny issue that has been in the side of baseball for 36 years. He has put it in the side of someone else. And it's going to be fascinating to see where it all leads. The only thing we know for sure is that somehow, some way, from the afterlife, Pete Rose will continue to make major headlines. It's incredible.
No doubt. Man, I appreciate the conversation. Keith O'Brien, check out his book, Charlie Hustle, The Rise and Fall of Pete Rose and the Last Glory Days of Baseball. Make sure you pick that up. And always a pleasure to talk to you, Keith. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me again.
In case you missed Rob Parker on the MLB Network, here's his latest appearance on MLB Now.
I say no way, no how. If Pete Rose wasn't fit when he was alive to be in the Hall of Fame, it doesn't make any sense to me that now he's fit because he's dead. The offenses are still the offenses. And what's the reason of having rules and then acting like nothing happened because he passed away? None of it makes any sense to me. I understand partly the commissioner saying, well, they're taking him off the list because he's not alive anymore. So, but it doesn't mean that he should now go on the ballot or have a chance to get in the Hall of Fame.
Well, I'll say this, Rob, I'm not even arguing against you. I don't think there's any right or wrong here. And you make an excellent point. He violated that rule. You made that decision. He's on the permanently ineligible list. Why would he come off? But I'll say this. Had he changed his ways at really any point through the 1990s or after and had copped to it, he didn't admit to it until 2004, then he could have been back in the game. And then you could at least put him on either to the baseball writers or one of these veterans committees and say, you make the call on this. Like, shouldn't he get the hearing, get the vote at the very least?
Well, he didn't do that, and that's why he forfeits this. This is, when you reinstate somebody, and here's my biggest point on why I disagree with this. If we found out that someone was wronged or was wrongly accused, or we had new evidence that maybe Pete Rose didn't do it or whatever it was, then you go in and correct that.
Okay.
We have no new evidence.
No. He did it. He did it.
There's nothing
He violated
new
it.
here.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, Rob, wait.
So
Rob, shouldn't he get a vote?
Right.
But this is not placing him into the Hall of Fame. He didn't fast track into the Hall. He's not being inducted this summer. He's going to a committee in 2 years. So that I'm better with. Let the Hall of Famers themselves. I think there should be an all Hall of Fame committee like they did for 3 times. They voted nobody in. Let them vote.
See, here's my issue. Then why even have the rules? There should be no rules.
They invoked the rule. They wrote a rule in 1990. Rob, they didn't have a rule. No one had to tell. Shoeless Joe Jackson was available to be voted on. And he got like a handful of votes in 1936, I think in 46 as well. But the very first vote in 1936 got a handful of votes. But most of the writers are like, no. The writers you could have said the same thing in 1991. No. And now this wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, but the only reason is I think baseball at the time made the right decision. The biggest harm to the game is the integrity of it. And when you don't have integrity on what you're watching is real or not, then you got to ask yourself, is this WWE or is this real? And you can't jeopardize that. And the whole notion, every time I hear Pete didn't bet against the Reds, Pete this, that, and the other thing. So you mean to tell me that a gambler with a chance to make money is also now he has honor, and the last thing he's going to do is bet against a team when he knows the starting pitcher on his team is terrible and is going to get lit up tonight? I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You're right. You're right. Do you vote for the steroid guys?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Hold on. The steroid guys who never tested positive, and before the rule was put in, which is 2005.
Oh, like it was okay before the rule was put in. We know that was, again, forbidden. It's verboten. They have to lie about it to get away with it.
Be fair, though. There was no rule on the book. Now,
you're kidding. There's so why didn't they admit it? If there's no rule, why didn't they say, by the way, I use testosterone, it's great, it's fantastic. It's 1998, I'm crushing it. Boy, I feel great. Why didn't they admit it if it was okay? There's no rule. It was not okay. It was
No, New
forbidden
York
by the
State is
culture.
gonna send-
It was not okay with the culture to take steroids then. It was not.
No, but it wasn't tested for, and none of those guys were suspended by the league. Here's the other thing. Should New York State send you driving violations for not wearing a seatbelt from the 70s, even though people didn't wear seatbelts? Come on, you can't
Don't
go
confuse
backwards.
things. You knew you couldn't do it back then. And by the way, all we're doing, this is what I always say, Rob, I'm choosing whether or not to honor a player. I choose to honor Fred McGriff over the guys who juiced. So his 493 home runs, they don't look as good as 640 or whatever it was that Sammy Sosa had. Okay, but I'm going to choose to honor the guy who played clean.
No. I disagree with that because you're rewarding people who don't have the statistics based on nothing other than them being clean and as a comparison to the other people. You should be in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame should be for extraordinary people who have done extraordinary things and not broken the rules that were set before them. You know this, BK. As a reporter, when you walked into a baseball clubhouse, there was no sign bigger on the wall than the one about gambling. Baseball was so strong on gambling. If you remember the casinos, when the casinos opened up and Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays were greeters in Atlantic City, they banned those guys from any baseball.
We're not arguing that. Yep. I'm surprised at your leniency for those who clearly violated the norms of the culture back then. They clearly did.
Because I didn't vote for Manny Ramirez because he got busted after they put.
So you draw the line there. Okay. All right. We can agree and disagree. Largely, I hear what you're saying, but not the steroid stuff. I completely
and you know what?
disagree.
If they put it up to a vote, there's a lot of guys who will wind up voting for Pete Rose. I just won't be one of them.
Yeah, and again, I'll say this last thing. Bonds and Clemens got on a Veterans Committee, right? McGuire, Palmeiro, they got on a Veterans Committee, and the answer was no. The answer is yes or no on Pete Rose, too.
Pete Rose is different. Pete Rose is different. He was very popular, and he's the all-time hit king. I'm telling you, he's different, and that's why baseball didn't even leave it up to the writers because they did not want to honor a guy who went against their number one rule.
Okay, gotcha there. Rob, great stuff. Thank you so much.
When Rob was a newspaper columnist, he lived by this motto. If I'm writing, I'm ripping. Let's bring in a writer or broadcaster, old or new.
Now let's welcome into the podcast. I call him the Super Reds fan, Mike Williams from Cincinnati. And Mike, a buddy of mine, every time I go to Cincinnati, guess who I go to the baseball game with? It's that guy right there, Mike Williams. What's up, Mike? How are you?
What's up, Rob? I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I had to get you on the podcast because last night was Pete Rose night at the Great American Ballpark, and you were there. I saw the pictures you sent me earlier. Just kind of tell me about it. I didn't realize they had already had this thing scheduled, and then it fell right when baseball made its announcement. What was that like last night at the ballpark?
Honestly, it was perfect timing. I mean, this was scheduled, I think two to 3 weeks after he died in September. So we knew about this for a minute, and it was standing room only, Rob. It was packed. It was kind of like opening day, but honestly, it was more people in the ball crowd for this than opening day.
Which is crazy, but we get it. I got to say this. Pete Rose is a very unique. It's not often that someone is born, in that city, becomes like one of the greatest players ever. And then, of course, he was on the Big Red Machine. I mean, Pete Rose is a Cincinnati icon. It's not like Mike, he was born in Northern Kentucky or Ohio or close by Cincinnati. He was born in Cincinnati. And you, as a younger guy, young fan, you know about Pete Rose, don't you? Everybody does.
Yes, he's a true West Sider. And my favorite thing about him is his underdog story. I mean, he's the champion. He's our Babe Ruth. That's what his son said yesterday. He's our Babe Ruth. So definitely.
What was the atmosphere? And I guess when you heard the announcement and people in Cincinnati, you still live and work in Cincinnati, when it came down from the commissioner, what was that like at work? People talking about it or your friends or whatever? What was that like?
Thought it was long overdue. I know how you feel, Rob, so I won't get into that debate with you, but we feel like this is something that should have happened when he was asking, in the late 90s or early 90s, late 90s. when the All-Star game came to Cincinnati. I mean, this is something.
I remember that 2015. He was allowed
Yeah,
on the field, though, if you remember, and he was banned. So baseball did bend. Can you at least give baseball that? He was there.
they did bend. They did allow the Reds to retire his jersey. Um, but you commented on something last night on that Odd Couple podcast. You said this isn't a coincidence, and you're right. It's not, because his family has been working behind the scenes with Commissioner Manfred to get this to get his blanket.
That yeah, his
Yeah,
banned status removed. Right.
get his stand baddest removed, and this is all about Pete. I know they happen to have the other players who gamble, but this is all about Pete. So
No,
we
no
appreciate it.
doubt. So last thing, I know you're a super Reds fan, and I'm going to see you in June when we go to the game, as I
Yes,
come every year. You know that. But the gambling and what he did doesn't bother you, or are you just willing to forgive him? Because let's not act like Pete Rose was an angel.
does it bother me? No, because he betted on his team to win every single night. I could see if he was intentionally sitting players or he was betting on them to lose, but he he wanted them to win every night, and that's what he betted on. So I do not, no, I do not.
There he is. That's the answer I expected from you. Super Reds fan, Mike Williams from Cincinnati, from the Natty.
Yes.
Join us here on Inside the Park, and we appreciate you.
Thanks, Rob.
Now, here's the best from MLBBro.com.
Charlie Duncan is dealing straight facts on MLBBro.com.
When Aaron Judge is locked in, there's no one in baseball more dangerous. And right now, he's on another level. The Yankees captain is putting up video game numbers in 2025, batting a ridiculous .411, leading all of Major League Baseball. He's already launched 14 homers, tied for the league lead, and his 40 RBI, best in the game. And if that's not enough, his 1.268 OPS is the highest in the majors, a number that puts him in MVP territory once again. He's not just leading the Yankees, he's putting the entire league on notice. This is Aaron Judge at his absolute best, and the season's just getting started. All rise, the MVP chase is on. This is Charlie Duncan, and those are straight facts on MLBBro.com.
For more, right now, go to MLBBro.com.
That ball is.
It was a big week in the big leagues.
Who's up? Who's up?
I don't believe it! My, oh my! Is it foul or is it fair? And now, from MLBBro.com, here's J.R. Gamble.
JR, is it foul or fair that Pete Rose is now eligible for the Hall of Fame in a few years and accused PED legends are still shut out from the Hall?
Foul. At least with Pete Rose, it was an agreed upon situation between him and Bart Giamatti in 1989, with Rose expecting to be reinstated one day. Giamatti passed on though, and it seemed like the commissioners who followed him, they just wanted to respect his last big decision. So they kept Rose out. No one capitalized on Pete Rose's gambling but Pete and the bookies. So that was greed. And he continued to deny it while doing it, I think, all the way up to 2015. On the other hand, Bonds, Mark McGwire, Roger Clemens, Manny Ramirez, just to name a few, admitted to their shortcomings and gave explanations why. But eventually, everyone from manager Joe Torre to Tony La Russa and Bobby Cox, they were all honorably inducted into the Hall of Fame, as well as overseeing commissioner Bud Selig. But they were to blame as well. They all looked the other way and won World Series with PD players. Sosa and McGwire chasing Maris's 61 homer mark in 98. That saved baseball. McGwire with 70 bombs. Wasn't the Senate committee hearings humiliating enough? Ohtani's $800 million contract and these bags, they come on the back of the accomplishments of all these players. And it's very hypocritical, people. Let's be real. We know there's steroid users in the Hall of Fame already. With baseball knee-deep in gambling partnerships, The Pete Rose facade is over. So should the PED assassination against the game's greats.
Make way for weekend wagers.
Yo, it's Sean Bo. Fire up those bed naps. Let's go. Oh me, oh my, 2-0 last week, and you know we were trying to do it 2 weeks in a row, and that starts off on Friday. Let's go ahead and hop over to the city of Chicago, where we got a little rivalry game between the Cubs and the White Sox. You already know where we're going, -1.5 on the big-time favorite Cubs to defeat those stanky little White Sox. Then for Saturday, let's head to another little inner-city rivalry as the New York Mets take on those New York Yankees in the Bronx. And no matter where we are in New York, you know those balls are going to be flying. Go ahead and take the over. Over 8.5 total runs between those Yankees and the Mets. Let's go 2-0 with Sean Bo inside the Parker.
Hi, I'm Rob Parker, the founder and editor of MLBBro.com, where we cover black and brown major leaguers. 75% of the content will be about the current black and brown stars in Major League Baseball. The other 25% will take a look back at some of the great black players. On the site, there'll be a ton of great written stories and videos and features.
MLB Bro, because you need to know.
MLB fans, when it comes to Major League Baseball, no one covers it better than the Odd Couple.
Fact. I am the baseball king.
First, second, third, and home.
We're leading shows with baseball. Game over. They don't watch it. They don't know the game.
All in one place.
Let's go!
Right here on Fox Sports Radio.
I love baseball.
In the words of New York TV legend, the late Bill Jorgensen, thanking you for your time this time until next time. Rob Parker, out.
He can't get it. This could be an inside to Parker.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat station.